So let's start with the cost of living going up, which politicians call inflation. Now let's be clear about this. The original definition of inflation is an expansion of the money supply. Politicians purposely changed the definition from being an expansion of the money supply to rising prices, and there are a few reasons why they changed the definition. The first reason is politicians and central banks who are in bed with each other, they are the ones responsible for expanding the money supply. They simply conjure money into existence straight off the printing press. Now remember, politicians are all liars, so rather than taking responsibility and admitting that the increase in the cost of living is caused by all the money that they print, they can blame entrepreneurs for raising their prices and label them as greedy businessmen trying to gouge their customers, which is another reason why they want you to believe that inflation means rising prices, but it doesn't. The original definition of inflation is an expansion of the money supply. Now, according to lying politicians, the rise of consumer prices, which they call inflation, have risen by 9%. But if you compare the price of food, gas, and energy to what it was last year, it's at least double that. The price of food has risen by 50% and the price of gas has almost doubled. And we also have massive supply chain shortages, which politicians are also blaming on everyone but themselves. As a way of tightening their grip, they used COVID-19 as an excuse to go on a tyrannical campaign to impose overreach in their power while also steering our economy into what I think is going to be a depression. They forced people not to work and they printed trillions of dollars into existence, and interest rates have been set at 0% or close to it for over a decade. Now, doing such a thing is complete idiocy, and I say it is proof of government's incompetence. By closing down the economy during COVID-19, they closed down growth domestic produce, so the supply of the products that workers work so hard to produce will obviously decline because workers were forced to stay home, and this decline in productivity is exactly why we have massive shortages in everything. But to make it worse, as we know, they printed trillions of dollars worth of debt into existence. Emphasis on the word debt. So with the oversupply of debt and a undersupply of products that workers weren't allowed to produce, prices go up. Now, it's important for people to understand that it's not greedy businesses trying to gouge their customers, and it's not COVID-19 that's the reason why prices have increased. We need to put the blame point blank where it belongs, and that is on the government and central banks. Their response to COVID-19 exasperated a problem that was doomed to fail from the beginning. All of this debt and the inflation that central banks have been printing is tied to bad assets. For example, let's look at the mortgage debt that we have here in Australia, Sydney in particular. In the suburb of Waterloo and surrounding areas, which is where I live, the average price for a 2-bedroom apartment is above $1 million. And the average price for rent on an equivalent property is around $700 per week. Now, if you were a first home buyer or even a property investor and you took out a 30-year mortgage tied to a $1 million apartment in Waterloo, Sydney, after you have paid your 10% deposit of $100,000 at the current mortgage rate of 4.24% on a 30-year loan, your weekly repayments would be $1,134. And on top of that, you would need to pay strata fees, which is around 0.7% of the value of the property, so around $7,000 per year, raising your weekly repayments to $1,264. So if you were to rent out an apartment at $700 per week, you would need to add an additional $564 on top of that just to cover your mortgage. So obviously, everything is out of balance, and to me, all of this is just proof of a real estate bubble which will soon implode. Now, one way to fight rising prices is to raise interest rates, but raising interest rates from 0% to a level above the current rate of rising prices, which is 9%, but as we know, it's probably double or even triple that, well, that would cause the whole economy to crash. Now, the point of low interest rates is to stimulate the economy, which in theory is a good thing. It allows banks to borrow and to loan out money at very low interest rates. So with all of this cheap money, the idea is that people will use this money productively and invest in strong assets like real estate or starting a business. But as has happened in the past, the majority of the money ends up being consumed rather than invested. People usually use this money for food, food and rent and whatever else they have left over. They buy things that they want rather than need, such as a new pair of the latest Jordans or the latest Louis Vuitton purse. So savings become non-existent, and because people blew away all their money, they then hate the people who actually invested their money wisely. And it's unfortunate that there are more people who blow their money rather than be smart with it, because that is exactly the ammunition that politicians need to win votes from the masses. And because the masses don't like seeing people doing better than they are, they foolishly give their votes to politicians who claim that they are going to tax the hell out of big business. And it's rather sad that people actually believe this, and it's ignorant for them to even want this, because what most people don't understand is that it's always the working class who end up being affected the most. Now, explaining how the middle class are always the ones who are most affected is a video within and of itself. But government legislation is the reason why local manufacturing jobs were forced overseas, because their legislation made it too expensive for us to manufacture anything of our own, which means less jobs. So now us so-called first world countries only have ourselves to blame for the rise of communist China, who is more than likely going to be the world's biggest economy very soon, as we have now become reliant on them to manufacture the goods that we need. And it really annoys me when I hear these politicians and central bankers say things like we have this super strong economy by pointing out the fact that we have all these new jobs post COVID-19. But that's just another lie, because the new jobs that they are talking about are actually jobs that were there before COVID-19. So they are not new jobs, they are old jobs that people are coming back to before politicians forced everyone to stay home. And now, due to the inflation that central banks have been printing, which has caused prices to rise, even the jobs that people are coming back to after COVID-19 are now dwindling away, and layoffs are starting to happen across the board because it's become too expensive to run a business. Construction is down, the technology sector is down, retail spending is down. Bankruptcies just this year alone are up by 65%, and we are only halfway through the year. And it's important for people to know that government spending is not free. All of this money that they print needs to be paid for one way or the other, and it's always the middle class that flips the bill, either through legitimate taxation or through the depreciation of your money, meaning your money loses its purchasing power over time. The more money that's circulating in the economy, the more debt that's circulating in the economy. So you, the consumer, eventually pays more for the products that you need. A strong economy is an economy that manufactures products for the rest of the world to buy, and that is achieved through free market capitalism. If we had less government spending and less government legislation, and we allowed the free market to operate, there would be more jobs and the cost of living would go down. So it's important for people to understand that taxing the hell out of big business is not a good thing. That is the reason why manufacturing jobs are non-existent in our economy. For example, at its peak, Australia was one of the top 10 car manufacturers in the world, and America was number 1. All of that changed after unnecessary taxes, so think about all the jobs that were lost. Now, I think the upcoming recession is going to be worse than the Great Depression of the 1930s, because we have a lot more debt now. So I say we have a date with economic destiny, and there is no easy solution to fix the mess that politicians and central banks created. No matter which choice central banks make, it's going to be a disaster. If they choose to stimulate the economy by printing more money rather than trying to fight rising prices, then that will simply postpone this disaster, and they can keep kicking the can down the road so that it buys them more time to figure out who they can blame rather than dealing with the problems that they created. Because if they really wanted to fix this mess, then it would mean massive cuts to government spending, and no politician wants that. Interest rates would need to rise to double digits, and if politicians had the courage to be honest and tell the truth to the public, it would also mean a massive increase of taxes on the middle class. There is more money in the collective middle class than there ever will be inside corporations and big businesses, and it's always taxpayers' money that governments use to fix the mess that they create. Politicians are to blame for our economic problems, but as you would expect, being the hypocrites that they are, they blame free market capitalism, they blame the rich, They blame greedy corporations, you name it, and they'll pin the blame on everyone but themselves. Now, I'm starting to think that maybe they want our economy to crash because they'll be able to use that as an excuse to grow government even more, so that we have this completely government planned economy. So in other words, the government will destroy the economy that was built by free market capitalism, and then they will blame free market capitalism for the destruction of the economy and claim that the solution is that we go all in on socialism. I think that is what they want, so that they can control what you say, they can control what you think, and they will punish all those who have a difference of opinion. So don't be one of these woke suckers who think that socialism is a good idea. Instead, show some courage and embrace the free market, because free market capitalism means freedom. For more videos on all things investing, subscribe to this channel.